An unknown virus suddenly broke out in Seoul, South Korea, causing those infected to lose control and turn into bloodthirsty monsters. Joon-woo, a homebody, noticed that the residents downstairs were fleeing in panic. A fire truck lost control and crashed into a car on the roadside. Someone screamed desperately for help, but their cries were quickly drowned out by the roars of the monsters in what used to be a bustling and orderly street. At this moment, the street had become a living hell. A little girl helplessly walked along searching for her mother, who upon seeing her rushed forward to embrace her. But in the next second, the girl's body began to convulse, and she crazily knocked her mother down. This terrifying scene scared Joon-woo greatly, and he couldn't comprehend what was happening. Why had the world suddenly turned into this horror? This is the Korean zombie film Alive, released in 2020, which became a benchmark in zombie-themed movies following Train to Busan. Director Cho Il-hyung used a thrilling survival scenario to tear away the warm facade of the modern city, allowing us to witness both the glimmers of humanity and the darkness in dire situations. With superb performances by Yoo Ah-in and Park Shin-hye, the film grossed $13.43 million worldwide after its release and became the first Korean film to top Netflix's global film rankings. Joon-woo was still in shock when he heard screams from the corridor outside, followed by urgent knocking on his door, so he tiptoed to the door and looked outside through the peephole. Seeing no one, he gently opened the door to check, only for a man to suddenly rush in.
뭐야? 죄송해요. 진짜 죄송합니다. 저 아시죠? 우리 전에 봤잖아요.
The man explained that he lived next door, but Joon-woo wasn't having any of it and tried to quickly get him out. However, the neighbor insisted that he would leave after using the bathroom. Joon-woo had no choice but to agree. Just then, the content on the television caught Joon-woo's attention. It turned out that the entire city of Seoul was experiencing a zombie crisis, with infected individuals exhibiting symptoms such as howling and bloodshot eyes and behaving extremely violently. Even more horrifying, there were instances of cannibalism. Seeing this, Joon-woo suddenly recalled that the neighbor who went to the bathroom seemed a bit off, so he hurried to a nearby drawer to take out a dagger for self-defense. Unexpectedly, the neighbor came out of the bathroom at that moment, holding his neck with his hand. Having also heard the news on TV, Joon-woo pointed the knife at him, terrified, and told him to get out of the apartment. The neighbor explained that nothing was wrong with him, but his eyes started to become bloodshot, which was a symptom of the infection.
아니야.
As the neighbor's emotions gradually spiraled out of control, the virus within him completely erupted and his body began to mutate.
너 나가라고! 야, 너 나가!
Seeing this man rushing towards him, Joon-woo quickly stopped him firmly and then used all his strength to push the man out. Joon-woo quickly closed the door and breathed heavily. He gathered the courage to look outside through the peephole and saw the neighbor being torn apart by another fat zombie, who then dragged him away. Joon-woo, coming to his senses, looked down and was immediately terrified by the blood flowing into the room. He quickly moved the refrigerator to block the door and anxiously tried to call for help, but couldn't get through. Just as he was frustrated by this, he suddenly received a text message from his parents on his phone instructing him to hide at home and survive well. Not knowing when the apocalypse would end, Joon-woo had no choice but to ration the limited food inside the house. A few packs of instant noodles, several bottles of drinks, along with some snacks and half a case of beer. He ate sparingly, consuming only a little bit each day, to maintain his strength while carefully avoiding making any noise. To understand the situation outside, he found his long unused drone and controlled it to fly outside. However, the footage the drone transmitted back made his skin crawl. The entire neighborhood had fallen, and the streets were filled with wandering zombies. They walked aimlessly, growling, and would frantically chase after any living thing they discovered. The once familiar supermarkets and cafes had now become gathering places for zombies. There was nothing else he could do at the moment. With no other choice, Joon-woo resorted to playing games to pass the time, but before finishing a round, the internet connection completely went out. At night, Joon-woo, filled with anxiety, had just fallen asleep when he was awakened by the noise outside the house. He immediately went to the window to look outside. It turned out that a female police officer was being chased by zombies and had escaped to this location. At this point, her handgun was out of bullets, and as she hurriedly changed ammunition, the zombies took advantage of the gap to rush towards her. The female officer was knocked down by a zombie, and then more zombies swarmed in, pinning her down and mercilessly biting her. Seeing no hope of escape, the female officer raised her gun to commit suicide, but was quickly tossed aside by the zombies and dragged into the garage. Seeing the female officer's struggling and painful appearance, Joon-woo couldn't bear it and suddenly opened the window, shouting for the zombies to stop. However, his shouting was of no use, and the female officer was still dragged into the depths of the garage. Joon-woo angrily hit the railing, and at that moment, something suddenly began to violently hit his house door. It must have been his shouting that attracted the zombies. Joon-woo grabbed a stick and slowly walked towards the door. Joon-woo was barely holding the refrigerator against the zombie to prevent it from entering, but its strength was overwhelming. Realizing he couldn't hold on much longer, Joon-woo quickly ran to the balcony, climbed over it, and stood outside the railing. By then, the zombie had broken through and entered the house, frantically attacking Joon-woo. Fortunately, Joon-woo managed to grab the lower part of the railing with both hands, narrowly escaping danger. Meanwhile, the policewoman from earlier had been infected and joined the zombie horde, returning to the house. Joon-woo looked at the overturned food on the floor with distress, as he already had little food, making the situation even worse. 15 days passed quickly, and the food and water at home were nearly depleted. Joon-woo started having hallucinations due to hunger, and his nerves were becoming increasingly agitated. Unexpectedly, he received a call from his mother, but the signal inside was poor, so he climbed outside the railing and eagerly answered the phone, only to hear the screams of his parents. Clearly, at this point, the fate of his parents had been sealed. He frantically smashed things in the room to vent, but was unable to do anything. With no food or water left at home, and his parents having been killed, he questioned what purpose there was in continuing to live. He then decided to hang himself. Just as he placed his head in the rope and kicked away the stool, a blinding red light suddenly shone on his face from the darkness. Joon-woo never expected that there would be other survivors in such a dire predicament. That red light was like a spark in the darkness, instantly igniting his fading desire to survive. Suddenly, he no longer wanted to die. Joon-woo walked to the window and looked towards the opposite apartment, discovering a beautiful woman. Excitedly, he greeted her, but considering it was too late, they agreed to talk at 7 a.m. the next morning. The woman was named Yoo-bin, and she was also one of the survivors trapped in the apartment. She had strong practical skills, excellent physical fitness, and a calm and decisive personality. Soon it was the next morning, and Yoo-bin asked Joon-woo if he was hungry. He patted his stomach and nodded. Yoo-bin swung her arm and threw a baseball with a rope attached towards Joon-woo, but it was too far and hit the bicycle shed downstairs. Joon-woo realized Yoo-bin's intention and sent out his drone, successfully delivering the rope to the opposite building. Yoo-bin took the rope, secured it, and sent some food and water to Joon-woo so he wouldn't starve to death. Afterwards, he gratefully and somewhat awkwardly thanked Yoo-bin. But just then, Joon-woo witnessed something terrifying. It turned out that a firefighter zombie downstairs was pulling the fallen rope. As it yanked the rope hard, the table pulled over, struck, and knocked Yoo-bin unconscious, and the table was wedged tightly against the window, causing big trouble. The zombie began to climb up the rope, retaining its muscle memory from before its mutation. In a moment of desperation, Joon-woo picked up a beer bottle. He threw it at the zombie, but it did not stop it from continuing to climb towards Yoo-bin's room. At this moment, Joon-woo deployed his drone to interfere. However, the zombie swatted it down with a claw, leaving Joon-woo truly helpless. At this time, the zombie had climbed to Yoo-bin's balcony, just as it was about to enter the room. Yoo-bin woke up just in time and successfully resolved the danger. Surviving by a hair's breadth, she felt a sudden rush of fear, knowing that if she had been a minute later, she would have become the zombie's meal. In the evening, Joon-woo quietly left his house and sneaked into a neighbor's room. He confiscated a lot of food and 2 walkie-talkies. After delivering supplies to Yoo-bin, the two heard each other's voices for the first time. In this way, the 2 survivors of the apocalypse leaned on each other for support. They encouraged each other, slowly seeing a glimmer of hope for survival. But they never received any rescue, and instead of starving, they decided to actively seek a way out. After getting ready, Yoo-bin took the initiative to leave, grabbing a rope and leaping directly from the 6th floor. Yoo-bin's fluid and skillful evasion of the zombies left Joon-woo utterly astonished. Yoo-bin emerged from the other side of a car, dispatching each obstructing zombie with a single axe swing. However, just as she was about to escape, Yoo-bin was knocked down by a zombie. In her panic, she saw the handgun previously dropped by a female officer, picked it up, and ran. But then she was knocked down again by a zombie that suddenly charged out from the basement. At this critical moment, Joon-woo arrived in time to save Yoo-bin. With their coordinated efforts, they evaded the attacks of several obstructing zombies and finally rushed into an apartment building, safely hiding in an elevator. It was truly thrilling and exciting. Soon the two reached the 8th floor, which was incredibly quiet with not a single zombie in sight. They tried to see if they could enter a room. However, at that moment, a zombie appeared at the stairwell, followed by countless others swarming in. In desperation, Joon-woo tore down a shutter door to block them, but the number of zombies was overwhelming, and he could only fight desperately to hold them back. Just when the two had no way out, a room door suddenly opened, pulling Yoo-bin inside. Then a smoke bomb was thrown out, and as the smoke spread, Joon-woo quickly got up and ran. Finally, they were safe. It was then that they noticed it was a middle-aged man in his 40s who had saved them. The man took out some food from his home and warmly hosted the two of them. The two had not eaten a proper meal in a long time, and upon seeing the delicious luncheon meat and bread, they could no longer hold back. They started eating ravenously, and the uncle watched them with a smile, though an imperceptible oddity flashed in his eyes. Before long, Joon-woo and Yoo-bin felt dizzy and powerless. Their vision began to blur. Joon-woo collapsed onto the table, and Yoo-bin was also swaying weakly. Then the uncle dragged Yoo-bin into a room. In the corner of the room, a woman was being held captive. Her hair was disheveled, clothes tattered, her face as pale as paper, and her eyes bloodshot, clearly having mutated into a zombie. Yoo-bin was chilled to the bone with fear. She finally understood that the kind uncle was not a friendly survivor, but a complete madman. It turned out that the woman was the homeowner's wife. When the apocalypse arrived, the wife was unfortunately infected and turned into a zombie, and the uncle, who loved her deeply, could only imprison her and continuously lure survivors as human fodder for her.
우리 마누라 지금 며칠째 굶었어. 아가씨 아니면 얼마나 더 굶을지 몰라.
Soon, there was no movement in the room. The uncle quietly opened the door to check, but was suddenly pounced upon and devoured by the zombie wife. Watching this tragic scene, Joon-woo and Yoo-bin were filled with complex emotions. They felt fortunate to escape the uncle's control but lamented the tragic fate of the couple. The darkness of human nature was vividly revealed at this moment. In the face of despair, some choose to uphold their conscience and support each other, while others are consumed by despair, becoming slaves to their desires. Gunshots alarmed a large number of zombies outside, causing them to rush to the 8th floor. The two had no time to reflect. They knew it was no longer safe here and they had to leave quickly. At that moment, the roar of a rescue helicopter suddenly came from the sky. Their eyes lit up and a strong hope for survival surged within them, leaving no time for further thought. They ran straight towards the rooftop. Zombies in the hallway heard their footsteps and swarmed, but they had only one goal in mind: to reach the rooftop and await rescue. Using their accumulated combat experience and weapons, they successfully repelled the zombies along the way, finally reaching the rooftop, but a large number of zombies had also followed. A horde of zombies was approaching. Just as they were about to be overwhelmed, the rescue team arrived in time and saved them. With the military's superior firepower providing cover, the two were able to board the helicopter and were successfully rescued. The fear, despair, and struggle of the past few days transformed at this moment into the joy of surviving a calamity. At this moment, Joon-woo also receives a message that his family is still alive. The government is making every effort to search and rescue survivors, and the situation is now under initial control. As the first Korean film to top the global Netflix movie charts, the success of Alive is no accident. The film not only features a thrilling plot and realistic zombie effects, but also offers profound human reflections and an emotional core. It shows us the horror of disaster and the brilliance of humanity, allowing us to feel the pain of despair and the power of hope. In this world full of uncertainties, we may never know what tomorrow will bring, but regardless of the challenges and setbacks we face, we must never give up hope for survival. As long as we are alive, there is a chance to change our circumstances and a chance to embrace a better future. While living, we must uphold our conscience, cherish those around us, and illuminate each other's path in life with love and courage. Just like at the end of the film when Joon-woo and Yoo-bin fly off in a helicopter, although they do not know what the future holds, they understand that as long as they are alive, there are endless possibilities. And this is precisely the deepest meaning of being alive.